Part 113. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1130. Latest website. Dad, you can't go against Huang Youwei and Secretary Li. Although these two people have nothing to do with you, it's uncomfortable for them to talk to you when there is a meeting above. The old leader has been transferred, but I feel that for a while will they transfer you to the railway. Xiao Zhou calculated quite carefully. Don't they just want this Lu Feng to do this? If they can't do it openly, let him go in private. Anyway, everyone is outside now. It is said that Lu Feng is a related household, and when the time comes it will be them and they will be the ones talking about each other, so we can say that it was due to pressure. The Posts and Telecommunications Group has been losing money for many years, and the country has become unbearable. The internal staff is redundant, and there is a lack of market competition. Regular employees are on sick leave and are paid, and all the workers are temporary workers. The purpose of splitting off China Unicom was for the two companies to compete and form a virtuous market cycle. In order to prevent his losses from being too ugly, Mr. Zhou continued to suppress them. He is just dawdling now. That person was transferred away, but he can't work here forever. He still has to show his loyalty. In the past 2 years, except for the tasks assigned by the above, he will do everything else. After working for more than 2 years, he still hasn't been transferred, and now he only has the energy to support him. When his son said this, Mr. Zhou suddenly felt that this matter should be handled more tactfully. Every person in charge who is about to leave is a carnival for the people below. Leaders are promoted, chickens and dogs are ascended to heaven, drivers, nannies, drunk girls, everything that can be arranged is arranged for you. Xiao Zhou saw what his father meant and said, "Dad, just leave this matter to me. No one will be dissatisfied this time." Mr. Zhou nodded in agreement. At the provincial hall, a Volkswagen drove slowly in and parked in the parking space. When Huang Youwei arrived, he had already told Lu Feng not to talk nonsense and to answer truthfully when asked. "Secretary Huang is here." Secretary Zhao came over, glanced at Lu Feng and said, "This is Mr. Lu, right? You are young and promising." "This is Secretary Zhao," Huang Youwei introduced. "Hello." Lu Feng shook hands and said a few polite words. "Go to the living room, Secretary Li is already waiting." The two of them followed Secretary Zhao forward, entered the room, and went up to the second floor. A tall double door was pushed open. The decoration inside was quite solid, not luxurious, but it also felt that the wooden floors, sofas, and decorations were very sophisticated. Sitting on the sofa was a man in his 50s or 60s. He looked quite dignified. He was wearing a knitted waistcoat outside his shirt. He looked a little friendly. When he saw Lu Feng and two people walking in, he pointed to the sofa next to him and said, "Here you come. Sit down." Huang Youwei felt a little restrained when he sat down, leaning forward. Lu Feng, who was leaning a little on the backrest, also sat forward. Don't underestimate a sitting posture, which is often a symbol of status. Most people in high positions sit firmly and lean on the backrest. Regarding the back, if you lean back too much, you will feel arrogant, and if you lean forward too much, you will feel that you are not majestic enough. This is something to be careful about. Today, I met with Mr. Zhou again. Mr. Shen and others had a meeting. The overall feeling is that they are still not active and may not have a clear understanding of the overall plan. Huang Youwei took the initiative to report. "Can't you see clearly? Do you really don't see clearly? Or do you not want to know? Let me tell you, whether you can do something is one thing, whether you want to do something is another thing. This is a world of difference. Thinking the problem is always a big problem." Secretary Li thought for a while and said, "The development of mobile communications in China is relatively strict. Many provinces are saying that you must first learn to walk, and then learn to run. There is no problem with this process, the problem is whether to dare to try. You are absolutely right. This is a matter of attitude. No matter when, you must take the first step bravely. This truth is very profound, Huang Yue said with great sincerity. Profound. Lu Feng looked at Huang Yue in disbelief. He didn't expect that he still had such a side, but Lu Feng didn't dare to show too much surprise. He just sat there quietly with tea on the table, picking it up and taking a sip from time to time. Mr. Lu, do you think you should give it a try? Secretary Li suddenly asked. When Lu Feng heard this, he immediately understood in his heart that the person in front of him wanted to try it. Asking himself, he must try it, just like he was asking a hungry person whether he should eat this meal. From a development perspective, I think we should try. Yearning for success may not necessarily lead to success, but fearing failure will definitely lead to failure, Lu Feng said. Ha 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 ha, these words are very philosophical. This is what you want to do. If you want us to cooperate with you, you have to tell me 1, 2, 3. Secretary Li looked at Lu Feng and seemed to want to start from Lu Feng. This is a great talk. Lu Feng glanced at Huang Yue, and Huang Yue pursed his lips and said, just say it. I think for the province, this is a business that won't lose money. As long as it wins, it will be a big win. There are 5 main reasons. Lu Feng sorted out his thoughts and said, first, there are already thousands of signal towers. These signal towers serve a small number of products. They are by no means operating at full capacity, and there is a certain amount of waste. Of course, Motorola and Nokia also sell mobile phones every year, but I still feel that they are not fully utilized. Second, we are currently undergoing industrial upgrading. The field of home appliances is already dominated by domestic products. However, with subsequent development, upgrading in the field of communications is an urgent matter. Mobile communications will be a battleground in the next decade. Which province can establish industrial advantages, then the national industrial chain will converge towards this province. Third, mobile communications will bring about earth-shaking changes in terms of convenience for business development. If foreign capital is allowed to do these things, first of all, the industrial chain will be lost, and various supporting enterprises will bring a large number of jobs. Secondly, the formation of market. Currently domestic signal base stations can be produced, but the signal is not very good. If the sales of mobile phones increase, the profits of the communication industry will increase, and upstream and downstream companies will have money to engage in research and development, which will form a virtuous cycle. Fourth, the first 3 points are all the advantages of success. The fourth point is the consequences of failure. The first point is that mobile communications will be needed sooner or later, but now the priority is fixed phones. If signal towers are built, we will. If the mobile phone is not successful, if mobile phones are developed in a few years, these base stations can also be used and will not be wasted. Fifth, the economic level in the province is sufficient. Mobile phones are a high-end consumer. Compared with other provinces, Jiangsu's per capita GDP is high enough. There are quite a few small business owners who can afford it. As long as they buy it, subsequent consumption will be inevitable. That's all I can think of at the moment. After hearing this, Secretary Li smiled and said, it's still relatively comprehensive. According to what you said, there is no harm at all. Even if it is unsuccessful, the things are still there, and it will be done sooner or later. Comrade Yue, what do you think? Woolen cloth. I think that if you want to be the first, you have to look at it from a development perspective, so when I first heard that he wanted to do this, I thought it was very good, Huang Yue replied. Since it is a good thing, then go ahead and promote it. No matter what the problem is, it must be solved. If you have any problems, you can raise them and save yourself time to think of solutions, Secretary Li said. Huang Yue nodded. Lu Feng could tell that he was probably involved in something he shouldn't have been involved in again. The problem now was obvious, but the two of them seemed invisible. They were playing riddles here, so there was no need to ask. I know, there may be something I don't understand here. A few minutes later, Lu Feng and Huan Yowei walked out of the living room. Just as they were about to leave, Secretary Zhao came over again and said to Huan Yowei, "Secretary Li asked you to come over again." Lu Feng immediately understood and walked out. In the reception room, Secretary Li looked at Huan Yowei, who came in again, and said, "Mobile communications is a very good development direction, but there are not many that the province can manage. If you want to take the first step, you must have the initiative and cooperate with each other. Industrial issues are employment issues, and employment issues are talent issues. If industries are concentrated and talents are concentrated, there will be economies of scale. This is an extremely huge market, and Jiangsu's future cannot be delayed just because of a trivial matter." "I know. I'll talk to Mr. Zhou again. If it doesn't work, I'll apply and report it," Huan Yowei replied. "The report is too slow." Secretary Li stood up and said, "This is the problem now, and it will still be the same problem in the future. It is better to solve it as soon as possible. It is the same as seeing a doctor. If you have this opportunity, you must seize it." After a while, Huan Yowei came out. When he saw Lu Feng, he smiled and said, "Let me congratulate you first. You heard the conversation just now. There is a high probability that your matter will succeed." "That's good, please take the trouble," Lu Feng said politely. The two of them got in the car and went back while talking. In the evening, the name Lu Feng was hotly discussed in some people's circles. They were talking about the arrival of a related person. This time they wanted to fight against the communism of telecommunications companies and wanted to take out state-owned assets. The relationship between Lu Feng and Huan Yowei was even more serious. It is rumored that it is amazing, especially if it was done in Suzhou. It is said that it has a nose and eyes. Xiao Zhou also listened to these rumors. He asked a few people who had contacted Lu Feng or Huan Yowei in Suzhou a few years ago, and called a few good friends around him to talk about what he wanted to do. "Little Mr. Zhou, I think you have thought more carefully about this matter than your father," a fat man in his 30s flattered. "How tall? Actually, I don't think it's appropriate for you to take action directly on this matter. We are not in the post and telecommunications group. Even if something goes wrong, you have nothing to do with it," another man wearing glasses said. Xiao Zhou looked at the man wearing glasses and smiled, otherwise how could he find them? "Then let's do it. Step 1. Treat us." Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1131. Latest website. On the way back, Huan Yowei told Lu Feng to let him talk to Mr. Zhou again. This was the result of multifaceted mediation. If the post and telecommunications really couldn't negotiate, they would need to be prepared. The province was willing to do this. If something happens, money will definitely be paid. Lu Feng nodded after hearing this and said, "Why don't we talk to the information department about this matter? It should be easy to talk to the province, right?" The car had stopped at the entrance of the municipal government. Huan Yowei glanced at Lu Feng and said, "Don't bother me anymore. I'm here. Let the driver take you to the hotel." After Huan Yowei finished speaking, he got out of the car. After the car door closed, Lu Feng leaned on his seat and sighed, "This matter is really troublesome." The driver turned the car around and said, "You dared to say just now that you asked the province to contact the information department. How do you think the superiors will look at it if you ask them for such a small thing?" When Lu Feng heard this, he immediately reacted. The provincial government went to the information department to figure out Secretary Li's ability. "What you pointed out is that I was just minding my own business and forgot about this. I really didn't realize that you are not simple," Lu Feng said with a smile. "It's just what you hear and see. You don't have to think too much when you're driving for the boss." The driver said no more and drove straight to the door of the hotel. Just after walking past the front desk, the little girl at the front desk saw Lu Feng and said, "Mr. Lu, are you back? Someone is looking for you." Two men in their 30s were sitting in a resting position not far away. When they heard Lu Feng's return, they stood up and walked over. One of the fat men said, "Mr. Lu of Jiafeng Group, right? Who are you two?" Lu Feng looked at the two of them, slightly confused. "Let me introduce myself. My surname is Tan and this is Wang. I recently heard that you want to cooperate with the Post and Telecommunications Group, so we both want to have a chat with you." The fat man asked Lu Feng, "How is it? Is it convenient?" Lu Feng looked at the two of them and asked, "What are your identities? Do you have such a way?" "Of course we have a way to come to you." Fatty Tan smiled and said, "How about having dinner together tonight? I'll introduce you to someone." "Okay," Lu Feng thought for a while and said, "Just stay here, I'll treat you." "No, we have made arrangements, let's go now," Fatty Tan said and was about to walk out the door. Lu Feng was stunned. He didn't know the details of these two people. If something happened, it would be a big deal. Nowadays, it's peaceful, not bad, not peaceful. From time to time, shocking stories appear in the newspapers. Case. When the thin man named Wang saw that Lu Feng didn't move, he said, "What? Are you afraid that we will eat you?" "That's not the case. It's just that I'm not familiar with you two, and it's getting dark now. I'm here to host you." Lu Feng said to the two of them, "If you think it's too late tonight, you can try it another day. Since Mr. Lu is worried, go to the private room on the 4th floor of the Wengzhen Pavilion Tea House by yourself." After saying this, Fatty Tan turned around and walked away. Lu Feng inquired at the front desk and found out that the Wengzhen Pavilion Tea House was located in the downtown area and there should be no big problems. After going out, he stopped a taxi and drove away. Wengzhen Pavilion Tea House. As night falls, the antique buildings outside and the neon lights look particularly dazzling. In the eyes of ordinary people, it is unclear what a tea house like this does for a living. On weekdays, no customers can be seen coming in and out, but it has never closed its doors in recent years. Fatty Tan and Fatty Wang are the owners of this tea house. Regardless of how many people visit this place in a week, they can definitely earn a lot of money in a year. When Lu Feng arrived at the place, he was led upstairs by a good-looking and elegant Cheongsam girl. On the 4th floor were several large private rooms separated by screens, decorated in an antique style. When I went upstairs, I saw Fatty Tan and Fatty Wang waiting there. "Oh, you came very quickly." Fatty Tan stood up and said, "Please sit down, but the young master hasn't come yet this week. You have to wait for a while and have a cup of tea first. The kitchen is already busy. It will be over in a moment. Who, take out the tea worth 100,000 yuan per pound and make some for Mr. Lu." Lu Feng was not polite. He sat down and looked at the two of them and asked, "Who is Mr. Zhou?" "Mr. Lu, we know that you have a good relationship with Secretary Huang. You are here to develop the communications business." Fatty Tan ignored Lu Feng's words and asked him, "Right. You guys are really well informed." Lu Feng smiled and nodded. "What advice can you give me?" "I'm an idle person, what advice can you give me? I just want to discuss a business with you. Everyone has their own opinions. Regarding communications, if you go to Huang Youwei, you really went to the wrong dock." Fatty Tan nodded. He handed Lu Feng another cigarette and said, "I have a way. If you find the right person, you can do big things with a small amount of money. If you find the wrong person, you can't get things done even if you spend money. I can tell that Mr. Tan is also a man with great hands and eyes." Lu Feng lit a cigarette and said, "You can come to me in person, I should feel happy on my face." While talking, the waiter brought several sets of exquisite tea sets, skillfully took out a piece of exquisitely packaged tea cake, brewed the tea, and brought out several exquisite refreshments. "Mr. Lu, there is only 1 century-old Dahongbao tree in Wuyi Mountain. We are reluctant to take it out when ordinary friends come, Fatty Wang said from the side. This is a good thing that even money can't buy. You taste it? Lu Feng looked at the tea and took a sip. He didn't have much research on tea, so he had to say it was good to set off the atmosphere. It's actually not that difficult to cooperate with the Post and Telecommunications Group. The key is, you have to be enlightened. If you are not enlightened, this matter will not be easy to handle, Fatty Wang said from the side. Open it. Lu Feng put down his teacup, looked at the two of them and asked, I'm a bit stupid. I don't know how to open this door. I have to learn more from the two elder brothers. Lu Feng's eldest brother called them both beautiful. Fatty Tan smiled and said, actually, it's simple. Mr. Lu is in business. He should understand that the same money is given to a company or to an individual. These are two different things. This account, calculated from the perspective of the unit, is very inappropriate, but if calculated in another way, it would be very suitable. The key is to know how to be flexible. You can't let people work in vain. If you work well, the company will make money, but if you don't work well, there will be complaints, Fatty Wang said bluntly. Would you like it if it were you? That's right, Lu Feng nodded repeatedly and said, but the problem is that I want to worship Buddha, but I can't find the temple gate. Tisk, Fatty Tan knocked on the table with his hand and said, Mr. Lu, you are already in the temple. Lu Feng glanced from both sides and said, is it so simple? Then I really have to thank the two living bodhisattvas. After the thing is done, I will never lose anything. The two of them were slightly unhappy when they heard this, and Fatty Wang said, I just did something small, so there is no need to thank you so much. We are not beggars. If you are really serious, we can also do some work for your company, son. Please cooperate. No problem, Lu Feng said politely. It can be heard that these two people are well versed in this area. They only accept cash for establishing relationships and make formal income through corporate cooperation or outsourcing projects. If it is really investigated, no one can say anything. After chatting for more than 10 minutes, the etiquette at the door came up and said, Master Zhou is here. The real Buddha is here this time. Fatty Tan stood up and said to Lu Feng, let's go, let's pay our respects below. The three of them hurried downstairs. A Mercedes-Benz was parked at the gate. A young man in his 30s walked out of the front row. He had short hair and was wearing a white casual suit. He looked quite elegant. Behind him was a young man in his 30s. Three girls came down from the seat, two of them were dressed very brightly, and the other was wearing work clothes, but her appearance and figure were also first-rate. It's been a while since I've been here. Have all the vendors at the door been cleared? Mr. Zhou glanced around and said, how comfortable this is. Let me tell you, I don't want to see poor people the most. So I just don't look at it, don't hang it in front of my eyes. The girl next to me stepped forward and said, you don't know that those selling vegetables and pots and pans don't have any good stuff. They are all profiteers. Those people are poor and deserve it. The four of them were chatting away, and Fatty Tan had already stepped forward to talk about driving away the vendors. The environment and hygiene of this place were unmatched by other places. Let me introduce someone to you. Fatty Tan stepped aside, waved to Lu Feng who was standing behind him, and said, this is a big boss, someone who does big business, Mr. Lu of Jiafeng Group. Mr. Zhou looked Lu Feng up and down with a bit of contempt. He casually handed his handbag to a girl behind him and asked, Mr. Lu? A businessman? Those who do business here are not worth anything. Dare you ask Lu, boss, what's your father's position? Lu Feng smiled and said, my parents are farmers. People in the village have worked hard on their own these years. Really or not, he looked very surprised and stared at Lu Feng and asked, so, you are from a legendary poor family? Don't dare, the poor family refers to the descendants of declining aristocrats. My family is not a noble family. Lu Feng smiled awkwardly. I didn't see it. You have some culture. What kind of education do you have? I don't have much education. I graduated from elementary school and usually read some miscellaneous things, Lu Feng replied. No education? It doesn't matter. I'm telling you, it's useless to have an education. If you don't stand here anymore, go up first. How is the kitchen prepared? Mr. Zhou asked. The bear paws that just arrived recently are absolutely fresh. The latest batch of Dahongbao has a market price of 100,000 yuan per cake, Fatty Tan said at the side. 100,000 yuan? Don't drink. Anything less than 200,000 yuan will irritate your throat. Mr. Zhou strode towards the inside. The three little girls smiled like nightmares. It seems that the standard tonight will not be too low. Fatty Tan and Fatty Wang followed Mr. Zhou, while Lu Feng followed at the back and was completely ignored. He couldn't get in the conversation at all. A group of people went upstairs, chatting and laughing. Mr. Zhou saw Lu Feng following him. Fatty Tan and Fatty Wang looked at each other and smiled tacitly. Today's showdown was a solid one. Latest website. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1132. Latest website. Going upstairs, Fatty Tan and Fatty Wang complimented Mr. Zhou. The three girls next to them came out to have fun from time to time. The scene was very lively. After the tea was brewed, Mr. Zhou sat there and boasted, "Do you know who I have had dinner with recently? Let me tell you, they are all big shots. When I go to the unit for inspections on weekdays, you can't even stand in front of them. In the past few years, I have also seen big scenes, especially during the holidays. The main reason is that you are lucky, but our dad is not." Fatty Tan's words were somewhat sour. Let me tell you, it's really not a father's business. My uncle is the chairman of the Shandong Post and Telecommunications Group. My dad, the second oldest child at home, is the chairman here. My fourth uncle is in charge of a coal mine in Shaanxi. It's hard to support a single tree. You should know the truth, right? You can't do it alone, you have to rely on the power of the family. I am also particularly grateful to my uncle and fourth uncle for giving me a lot of guidance, Mr. Zhou said proudly. Fatty Wang asked curiously, where is your third uncle? My third uncle is just a small clerk. He doesn't have much potential and doesn't usually interact with each other. After speaking, Mr. Zhou looked around and said to the three beauties, don't think you three are not as rich as the other two, but you are eating. I'm telling you, people who work for the government, it's no use having money. No matter how rich you are, I can manage you. 10,000 taels of gold is not as good as a 7th grade official. Several people at the scene also agreed. Lu Feng sat there and watched them chatting in full swing, as if he shouldn't be here. Just when he was thinking about whether to leave, Mr. Zhou said, if you are rich, then we are here. If all the people in the group are put together, I'm afraid not even Mr. Lu will be rich. When Lu Feng heard them suddenly mentioning him, he raised his head and smiled and said modestly, I don't have much money either. Don't say you don't have much money. You are the richest man. That's what we use here. Let's put it this way. If you say you can do it, you can do it. If you say you can't, then you can't. If you have money but no power, in the end it's just a money bag. Mr. Zhou said very straightforwardly, if you want to cooperate with the Post and Telecommunications Group, don't you have to find me. That's right, I hope you can open your mouth and get this matter settled. Lu Feng complimented him a few words, and then got down to business and said, it's still the conditions I told Mr. Zhou, the 10 million internet access fee, we will contribute, but we will contribute a very small part of the subsequent construction, or if we do not contribute 10 million, we will contribute half of the subsequent construction of the signal towers, but we have to share the subsequent income from these signal towers. Mr. Liu, look at what you said. You can't talk about anything. Why are you so serious? I've already asked Mr. Zhou for help. Is there anything I can't do? Fatty Tan said from the side. Well, I'll be a how about the middleman, if you give me the middle one and fold all your conditions in half. Mr. Zhou sat there silently, lowering his head and groping for his bracelet. Fatty Tan saw that Mr. Zhou was silent and didn't know what to say. He asked Miss Etiquette, how is the preparation in the kitchen? Make a meal so slow, I don't want them to pack up my bed and get out of here. In less than 2 minutes, the first dish was served. The chef came over to apologize. Mr. Zhou said calmly, let's eat. Fatty Wang took the opportunity to pull Lu Feng aside and whispered, Mr. Liu, please pay more attention. As someone who has been in shopping malls for a long time, you know how to speak, right? What's wrong? Lu Feng looked at him with raised eyebrows and asked, where did I say something wrong? Look at you, what I said before is very good. How can you let others do things when you first come up? You have to be your own person first. We are here to help you. You can't ruin things by yourself, Wang Fatzi said to him. Lu Feng said, in a moment, let's toast a few more glasses of wine, say some nice words, and finally settle the bill. Check out. Isn't this your tea house? Lu Feng wondered. Tisk, Fatty Wang seemed to be very dissatisfied with Lu Feng's performance. He frowned slightly and said, you still have this little money? Besides, we are organizing things for you. You can't let us help you food money, right? This is really important for such a big thing. You will remember it later and don't bring it up today. When you get into the circle, your problems won't be a big deal. After Lu Feng heard this, he secretly thought that they were treating him like an ordinary person. Many people who wanted to join the circle, who were new to leaders or in higher level circles, would be educated like this. When you understand the faces of this group of people, you will find that the so-called rules do not exist at all, they are just a means and excuse to suppress you. As for circles, Lu Feng is quite disdainful of this. Having been born in 2 lifetimes, he has a different understanding of circles than others. The so-called circle refers to a group of interests and the same 3 views. Everyone eats from the same pig trough. It's not called a circle, it's a circle. When you eat in a pig trough and go out to play at the same time, your friend touches someone else's girlfriend. You think it's normal, and the people in the circle think it doesn't matter. A circle is a place where 3 views are screened. It may be illegal or immoral, but if you want to eat in a pig trough, you have to accept the 3 views in the circle, even if it is dirty, obscene, or something you despise. The food on the dining table was served very quickly, and several bottles of Maotai wine had been opened. The 3 beauties took the lead in performing a mouth-watering performance. Several people on the scene cheered, and the shouts were a bit like monkeys in the circus. Fatty Tan pursed his lips and said to Lu Feng, I'll give Mr. Zhou a toast. Today is the first time we've met. How about 3 drinks in a row? There was a roar of applause at the scene. The glass in front of Lu Feng had already been filled up. The smell was astringent and made people frown. Lu Feng waved his hands repeatedly and said, I really don't know how to drink. Why don't you get me a bottle of red wine? Can I drink some red wine? Look at what you said, I'm a girl who wants to have a drink with me, you're not even inferior to me, are you? The girl next to me encouraged, cheer up Mr. Liu, take a deep breath, and show your manliness. At this moment, Lu Feng seemed to be no longer a man if he didn't drink the glass of wine. Seeing that he didn't drink, the atmosphere at the scene became colder. Everyone stared at him. Fatty Wang said, drink it? This a cup is only 3 or 4 taels. I really can't drink. This is not a matter of giving face. The main thing here today is to talk about things. I can't drink. I'm afraid I won't even be able to talk in a while. Lu Feng pushed the wine glass back as he spoke. For a moment. You won't die after drinking this drink, so why don't you give me any face? Mr. Joe doesn't even give you any face? Then what are you going to do? Fatty Tan said with an annoyed look on his face. The atmosphere at the scene was very oppressive. If anyone else were here, not to mention 1 cup, 10 cups would have to be poured down. Since things can't be done, I'll leave first. Lu Feng looked very upright and stood up, making a gesture of leaving. Hey hey hey. Fatty Tan was anxious. He had been busy for a long time and it was impossible to let him go. He hurriedly pulled Lu Feng aside and whispered, "Brother, I am helping you. Don't let me get off the stage and have a drink. That's it, it's not your life. You give me some face. Even if you don't give me face, you have to give Mr. Joe some face, otherwise why should I help you with things? If you don't want to do it, just don't do it. If you try to find a way, it really won't work. When I go to the meeting between the Ministry of Information Industry and the State-Owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commission after the new year, if I mention this matter more, maybe it can be done," Lu Feng said very directly. Fatty Tan was stupefied by these words. He could only blame the fact that the fish in front of him was different from the past. In the past, those who asked them to do things were all from the bottom. But when they came to this dinner table, they were at their mercy. Lu Feng is not like this. Then we don't drink. As long as it's easier for you to go up there, you won't have to come here. The process is very troublesome and the interpersonal relationships are complicated. I believe you know that it takes time and energy. Don't just leave. Sit down. Come down and chat. Fatty Tan persuaded Lu Feng to come back. Bring Mr. Lu a bottle of red wine. Fatty Tan sat down and ordered. We brought red wine and chatted for a while. One of the girls volunteered to dance. She was very coquettish. When he returned to his seat, Mr. Joe patted his butt with satisfaction. Fatty Wang put his head on Lu Feng's back. Whispered to Fatty Tan, "What a humming slut. Xiao Lu, I heard what my dad said about your matter." Mr. Joe lit a cigar and leaned on his chair and said, "According to regulations, this matter of yours is not easy to handle. Now the state requires landline. This is what all communications companies have to do to increase their market share. This is not a matter of money, do you understand? Young Master Joe is telling you this kind of thing. If you go outside and ask, you might not even be able to find the door." The girl next to her said in a rather insider tone, "I thought you were a person, so I told you this." These. The girl next to me also chatted with him, saying that despite how much money the private enterprises outside made, in front of them, you still had to bow your head and give gifts through the door. Facing the pressure from this group of people in the circle, Lu Feng smiled and said, "I also know all this news. Let's not talk about the meeting in the city. President Joe said it. Secondly, the content of the meeting in the province, Secretary Huang, they all told me that I still adhere to the concept of common development. Don't keep your mouth shut about Huang Youwei. Who is he? Let me tell you, in my interpersonal relationship, he is not even worthy of carrying my shoes." Mr. Joe was annoyed by Lu Feng's words and took a puff of his cigar. "Huang Youwei is so powerful. Why don't you ask him to do it for you? What do you want from me? It's not about who is good or not, but we have to get back to the essence of this matter. We will do what is beneficial to the people," Lu Feng said sincerely. Mr. Joe was stunned when he heard this. He smashed his cigar into the ashtray, stared at Lu Feng and said, "I am the people. This table is filled with people." Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1133. Latest website. Lu Feng couldn't help laughing when he heard this. This was definitely the funniest joke he had ever heard. Mr. Lu, you don't need to mention Huang Yowei here. Fatty Tan leaned on the chair and said, you are here to make money. Who can make you earn more? Whose side should you stand on? As a human being, be more flexible. Mr. Zhou's connections are not much worse than Huang Yowei's. Why does it sound like you're asking me to change my family? Lu Feng took a sip of the red wine in front of him and said, the key is that I'm not under anyone else. Let's get back to the matter itself. Lu Feng wants to talk about things, but these people don't want to talk about things. They want to talk about which camp you are on. As long as you are on their side, no matter what, everything that can be done will be done for you. Wang Fatzi said from the side, the energy behind Mr. Zhou is absolutely beyond your imagination. Let me tell you this, the communication system is from head to toe. You can find anyone you want. As long as you follow Mr. Zhou, you will be able to. As long as it belongs to the GFN group, we will support it. We can also help with any projects or business that the GFN group has. Let me tell you this. Mr. Zhou sat up straight, stared at Lu Feng and asked, I can help you, but you have to let me know whether I am helping you or Huang Yowei. If you ask this question if you can't think clearly, then we don't have to talk. Having said this, there is no more straightforward expression. Lu Feng picked up the red wine, gestured to Mr. Zhou and said, I really don't belong to these circles, I just want to do something, and we have the money, let's cooperate together, isn't it good? Then you can't do it, Mr. Zhou said firmly. In this case, you can at least let me know how powerful our circle is, right? I am a businessman. If you are really powerful, I will naturally make a choice. Lu Feng clinked glasses with Mr. Zhou and said, here's to you. Since Mr. Lu said so, I have to show it off, but don't be scared, Mr. Zhou said with a smile. It will definitely scare him and leave him stunned, Fatty Tan said with a smile. The atmosphere at the dinner table recovered a lot, and there was another round of changing glasses. After 3 drinks, the atmosphere reached a climax with another girl singing a song. When they were happy after drinking, Mr. Zhou boasted to him about their past. His family was very powerful in the province, and the original leader had a close relationship with his father. Don't look at the people who have been transferred now, but they have been promoted to higher levels. With the depth of local operations, no matter which department you open the door to, you have to give face. What do you mean by one of your own? Your own people are yours to serve the higher UPS, and the relationships with the higher UPS are your relationships. At 10 o'clock in the evening, Mr. Zhou was very drunk and said that he would organize a dinner in 2 days to open Lu Feng's eyes. Even though he was rich, in other people's network, having money was nothing. Everyone helped Mr. Zhou get into the car and watched him leave. Fatty Tan took a puff of cigarette, and the smoke drifted into the distance with the evening breeze. He turned back to look at Lu Feng and said, how is it? This game is not for nothing. Bar. But there's still no progress at all. Lu Feng took a deep breath and said, look at you, when it comes to some things, fast is slow and slow is fast. This kind of thing cannot be done quickly, Fatty Tan said from the side. Lu Feng nodded and said, it's getting late, so I'll take my leave first. Don't worry, go back and settle the bill first, Fatty Wang reminded from the side. Lu Feng waved his hand and said, don't worry, there will be many places to use the 2 positions in the future. Since we have come to this point, there is no need to settle the accounts one by one, right? The 2 of them looked at each other and thought that it was impossible for a boss as big as him not to contact him just for the sake of 10,000 yuan of meal money, right? Lu Feng hailed a taxi and headed straight to the hotel. In the municipal government, Huang Yowei's office is still brightly lit. The deputy mayor in charge of finance and the head of the municipal commission for discipline inspection are sitting at their desks in silence. The cigarette in Huang Yowei's hand has been half burned, and the ash can't withstand the pressure and breaks and falls. Huang Yowei came back to his senses, patted his clothes with his hands, and asked, before I came here, there was a cooperation in the city to promote telephone calls to thousands of households, right? Yes, the city provided 10 million, the province provided 5 million, and the Post and Telecommunications Group provided 5 million. They provided 5,000 landline phones, mainly for telephone lines for enterprises. This matter has been going on for many years. The person in charge of finance, the deputy mayor, wondered why he mentioned this matter. If it's 20 million, I'll have to connect 5,000 landline phone lines, which costs 4,000 yuan per phone. Huang Yawei put out the cigarette butt in the ashtray and said, I remember there were dozens of phone lines, even there were hundreds of interfaces. How many wires did they pull? How much labor was used? How many kilometers of phone lines? How many telephone poles? The deputy mayor was a little at a loss and couldn't help but said, Secretary Huang, there is no way to check old accounts. Why not? Why not? Who made these rules? Huang Yawei asked the two of them. There is a tacit understanding, right? Are you afraid that if you leave, others will check your old accounts? I'm not afraid. I want to find out how the 10 million was spent back then. Since you want to talk about this, let me tell you something. It was more than 10 million that year. After the completion, the other party said that the price of raw materials such as telephone poles and telephone lines had increased, resulting in a lot of excess. The three companies shared it equally. The city spent another 3 million to fill the hole, the deputy mayor replied. This money is really inappropriate. Can this account be reconciled with the Post and Telecommunications Group? Huang Yawei asked. It was difficult. At that time, it was an outsourcing company, and the Post and Telecommunications Group was the guiding unit. The outsourcing company had already closed down, and a lot of people and things were involved. The owner of the construction company at that time was named Ten, and I know that the person in charge of the guiding unit was Zhou. The president's son just came in at that time, the deputy mayor replied. Huang Yawei used his toes to figure out what was going on in it. He looked at the person in charge of the Discipline Inspection Commission and asked, Can this matter be investigated? Do you have the ability? What did you do for food back then? Me, the person in charge of the Discipline Inspection Commission was speechless for a long time. He didn't dare to investigate even if he had the courage to do so. The accounts should be reconciled. What happened back then must be clarified. How much money can the municipal government make in a year? No matter who is involved in this matter, they must get to the bottom of it. Don't tell me about the unspoken rules. I'm not afraid. Investigate, I can investigate anyone who wants to. Huang Yawei lit a cigarette and said, We will investigate this matter starting tomorrow. The next morning, the finance department held a meeting and called some senior executives from the Post and Telecommunications Group to the meeting. Some of the finance accounts were not reconciled, and they were expected to explain the details of that year's bills. Some sensitive people have already sensed that something is wrong. Ever since Lu Feng came, the city has been at odds with the Post and Telecommunications Group. You must know that such internal matters are all negotiated and business-like is unusual. The meeting in the morning was extremely noisy. People from the Post and Telecommunications Group said that it happened many years ago. If you want a bill, don't ask us. We are the guidance unit and should ask the construction company back then, but the construction company has closed down long ago. The finance department questioned the subsequent 3 million and asked them to make it clear that they were the guiding unit and should also have the authority to supervise. Otherwise, they would refund the 3 million to the municipal government, plus the interest over the past few years. At noon, several senior executives went back to report this matter to Mr. Zhou. After hearing this, Mr. Zhou slammed the table and shouted angrily, You want us to refund the money? Have we made money from them? Why didn't we dare to do this back then? It's been 4 or 5 years, why are you looking for this? That bastard deputy mayor is really a grandson. No wonder he has only been a deputy mayor these years. Back then, He had 800 courages to dare to fart like this, Mr. Joe shouted angrily. Anger is anger, but Mr. Joe also knows that these $3 million cannot be returned. As long as they are returned, it means that there is indeed something wrong with what happened back then. Follow up and investigate, pull out the carrot and bring out the mud. Not return? If you don't return it, keep asking. If they can't produce detailed receipts, they will be passive for a day. This is destined to be a matter of trouble at both ends. Mr. Joe sat there and cursed Huang Yowei. What a beast he did, he actually turned over an old score. The executive sitting opposite had an extremely wrinkled face and whispered, "This is a game. No matter what we do, we will lose." Mr. Joe thought for a moment and said in a deep voice, "We can't limit ourselves to this matter. If we want to break this situation, we have to start from the outside. Doesn't he like to turn over old scores? Let's turn over them too. Send someone to Suzhou and let's do a good job go through his old accounts. Isn't Mr. Liu close to him? Then make good use of Mr. Liu. Doesn't he want to enter the local 2G signal network, so give it away for free." After drinking a lot of wine last night, Lu Feng woke up at 12 noon with a headache. He asked the hotel to prepare some sugar water to relieve the hangover. He got up just after 2 o'clock, washed up briefly, and went to the restaurant to have a quick lunch. While they were eating, a waiter came over and said to Lu Feng, "Mr. Liu, I have your phone number. I am in a hurry." Lu Feng stood up slightly confused and followed the waiter to the phone desk. The phone had been picked up and put aside. Lu Feng picked it up and asked, "I'm Lu Feng, who are you?" "It's me, Brother Tan." "Did you drink a little too much last night?" Fatty Tan's voice was kind and caring. Lu Feng was stunned when he heard these caring words. He hadn't even entered his circle yet, so why did his attitude change completely? It's indeed a bit much. "I don't drink often. I just woke up," Lu Feng said politely. "What we talked about last night were actually mostly wine table talk. Today Mr. Joe told me that you are a very good person and he likes you very much. We are all on our own side and can discuss everything. Tonight we have let's have a dinner at my tea house. I hope you can come to join us. To be honest, we just want to create an atmosphere. As long as we can chat with each other, I can give you whatever you want for free." "Done. Can you do it even if you don't need money?" Lu Feng felt that the other party had changed so quickly that he was very surprised. This 180-degree turn made Lu Feng think a lot in an instant, but he couldn't think of a clue. He didn't know how the world had changed so much just overnight. Thousands of years of delusion. Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1134. Latest website. That's great. If this matter comes to pass, I'll have to write more to Mr. Tan, Lu Feng said politely on the phone. After chatting for a long time, Lu Feng wanted to get some inside information, but the other party was tight-lipped and kept saying that Mr. Joe thought Lu Feng was a good person and his performance last night was very good. Lu Feng absolutely did not believe these words. After hanging up the phone, Lu Feng secretly speculated about the doorway inside. There might be many things he didn't know. It was still far away from the evening, and Lu Feng didn't care about eating. After much deliberation, he decided to call Huang Yowei. Huang Yowei was not surprised when he received Lu Feng's call and asked slowly, "What's the matter? Have you done anything lately?" Lu Feng asked straight to the point. "Tell me first, who did you have dinner with last night?" Huang Yowei asked. "Things must be done. For us, the mobile phone business is very important. It will be online after the Chinese New Year. I don't care how you fight with each other. You can't say that if you fight for a year, I will wait for a year, right?" Lu Feng took the phone and said, "As for business, we always discuss it with everyone. Let's discuss it first. You talk about your voice, I'm busy with my business. Huang Yowei put down the pen in his hand and said seriously, but I still want to advise you, don't fall in line. There are some things, and you can speak quickly, as long as if you want, it will be very fast. I do. Lu Feng frowned slightly, feeling that something was not right. It seemed that something was not right since he came here. I think you can feel how many things are hidden in that tea house. They are more cautious in doing things. They need someone to dig out those bad things. Huang Yowei said unhurriedly, you are a good candidate, everyone knows that you want to do mobile phone business, it is a natural thing. When I told you I was coming, you were planning this. Lu Feng's voice rose several decibels. Are you so surprised? Does it matter to you that things are going smoothly? This thorn has been stuck for several years. Now is the best time. By then, your mobile phone business will definitely be unimpeded. Huang Yowei said into the phone, that's all, you think about it yourself. After hanging up the phone, Lu Feng felt for the first time that he had been tricked. No wonder Huang Yowei was so welcoming when he came this time and was waiting for him here. Such state-owned enterprises are not under the control of the local government, and they cannot reach out. They need an opportunity. Lu Feng's arrival established a connection between the state-owned enterprises and the local government, and some things were easily handled. Only now did Lu Feng understand why he said in Secretary Li's office that day that he should seize the window opportunity and solve it all at once. Lu Feng spent the whole afternoon thinking about whether he should get involved, but the problem is that he can't get involved now even if he doesn't want to. There are only a few major economic provinces in the country, and it will not be easy to negotiate in a short time. If Jiangsu can't get it, if you come down here, it will be even worse if you go anywhere else. Old acquaintances like Huang Yowei have set this trap for him, and there may be pitfalls to be taken when he goes to other places. The problem is that Mr. Zhou's family has been working in the communication system for many years. If he is brought down, he may be in trouble if he deals with people in this industry in the future. How can I take advantage of him? I'm going to let him get cheated. Lu Feng sighed helplessly. In the evening, a Mercedes-Benz stopped downstairs in the hotel. Fatty Tan got out of the car and went to Lu Feng's room in person. He knocked on the door and said to Lu Feng, Mr. Lu, I'm disturbing your rest, right? No, I'm ready. Lu Feng changed his clothes, looked at Fatty Tan who was smiling today and said, why are you here in person? It's all as it should be. Now you are my golden master. As long as Mr. Zhou is happy, no matter when you come here in the future, just make a phone call and I will arrange everything for you. Fatty Tan looked particularly cordial and stood at the door and faced Lu Feng. He said, last night, Mr. Zhou went back and told Mr. Zhou that in fact, Mr. Zhou was really not targeting you, it was mainly about other issues. I'm a businessman. I don't want to know too much about other things. As long as the business can be successful, the rest doesn't matter. Lu Feng casually picked up his suit jacket and put it on, and said, let's go. Along the way, Fatty Tan was talking to Lu Feng about Mr. Zhou. In the past few years, he had managed the province's communications in an orderly manner and was ranked among the top talents in the country. However, with the change of people in the province, everything has changed. The original plan is still being implemented. It is impossible to invest so much and just say no. In the past, they mainly served enterprises and set up communication between enterprises. Local enterprises contributed a sum of money, the city contributed a sum of money, state-owned enterprises contributed a sum of money, and then found a company to do it. In this way, everyone borne the cost. Both are low cost and can quickly set up a communication system. This is no longer possible. Communications companies are required to bear all the costs, and priority is given to municipalities and public systems to upgrade telephone lines. Fatty Tan, who was sitting in the passenger seat, turned back to Lu Feng in the back seat and said, there are a lot of things going on here. State-owned enterprises use money to do projects for the municipal government, but the municipal government and other agencies don't pay for it. The phone numbers in those offices are enough. Where did the extra construction go? Let me tell you, privately it was taken to factories and residents' homes to resell quotas. Lu Feng smiled awkwardly after hearing these inside stories and said, I really don't know much about these. Don't look at those people sitting in the office. There are 5 to 6 people holding a teacup. Let me tell you, they are full of evil at this moment. Fatty Tan seemed to have become a good man who was concerned about the country and the people. He sighed and said, state-owned enterprises are all yours. So fat, who wouldn't want to take advantage of it? Of course, you and Huang Yowei have a good relationship, so there are some things I wouldn't be comfortable saying. My relationship with Huang Yowei is actually not that good. Lu Feng wanted to hear what he had to say, so he said, it's just about investment. I would like to hear what Huang Yowei is like. I heard that he has many young wives outside, and they often go out to play. Even though he looks honest, he has a lot of fun in private. Fatty Tan seemed to know a lot of inside stories. I really didn't see it clearly. Fatty Tan chatted about Huang Yowei all the way, saying that this person had some abilities, but he had begun to change in the past 2 years, especially since he came here. He had met him twice at karaoke, and the private rumors were even worse. There was an uproar. The car stopped at the entrance of the tea house. Lu Feng got out of the car and chatted and laughed with Fatty Tan. They seemed to have a very harmonious relationship. When he went upstairs, there were already 4 or 5 people sitting upstairs, all of whom looked to be in their 40s or 50s. Are you all here? Let me introduce you to everyone. Fatty Tan introduced to everyone, this is President Lu of GFN Group, which is the CEO of the largest private enterprise in the country. Several people were polite to each other. This is President Wu of our court. This is Director Ho of the Public Security Bureau. This is the market manager. The 4 or 5 people present were all prominent local figures. Such a small tea house was able to attract these people, which was enough to show the strength of Mr. Zhou. From this point of view, those heroic words last night were not just bragging. Fatty Wang said from the side, in business, we all take care of each other. You take care of us, and we take care of you. I believe that Mr. Lu's business here will definitely develop smoothly. I still have to thank you all for your consideration. Lu Feng sat down politely. Everyone at the scene was chatting away, and most of them had nothing to do with Lu Feng. They were just talking about who was transferred, who did what, insider gossip and so on. After waiting for more than half an hour, Mr. Zhou went upstairs under the guidance of etiquette at the door. Everyone saw him walking up and stood up to be polite. I'm sorry, I'm really late, I kept everyone waiting. Oh, Mr. Lu, I kept you waiting. Mr. Zhou shook hands with Lu Feng with a smile on his face. Different from the arrogance last night, today there are more with a bit of compliment. He shook Lu Feng's hand and said, I drank some wine after I finished and made a fool of myself. Please bear with me. What you said is exaggerated. Lu Feng held his hand and said. Lu Feng stared at the young Master Zhou who was in his early 30s in front of him. He had met many second generations over the years, but this young Master Zhou was definitely one of the shrewd ones. Today is really full of guests, please sit down. Mr. Zhou asked everyone to sit down and said, I have called everyone here, mainly to introduce you to Mr. Lu. Mr. Lu wants to develop mobile communications, which is very important to us. Local communications companies will definitely be a big help, which is a great thing that benefits the country and the people. I'm also doing business, I'm doing business. Lu Feng didn't know what he wanted to say, so he could only deal with it. There are some things that cannot be put on the table, but we still have to do it after all. We have such a mission. Yesterday, we held a meeting within the group and believed that cooperation with GFN Group is very necessary. It is a kind of exploration, is also a model for branches in other provinces. Mr. Zhou sat down and said, we develop through cooperation, So let's not talk about money first, let's talk about things first. It's good to talk about things, and when things are done, the money will come, Fatty Tan said from the side. As long as the profit model and cooperation model are determined, everything else is a trivial matter. The atmosphere at the scene was quite lively, and all kinds of empty talk began to be talked about, but it was not true. I drank several pots of tea, and talked about everything from market management to law. The relationship became longer and longer. As the food arrived, Fatty Tan asked people to set up the karaoke equipment, and they were eating, drinking, and singing. Several etiquette girls downstairs were not idle either, standing aside to dance with him. So lively. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 delicious dishes, Mr. Zhou saw Lu Feng announcing quite proudly, Jiufeng's network access fees are all waived. Not only is it waived, but the two of us can set up a public-private partnership to jointly invest in signal towers. Doesn't Mr. Lu want to invest in more signal towers across the province? Before, you felt that the money was invested and it was managed by the Post and Telecommunications Group. If you feel that it is a loss, then well, let's set up a company and manage it together. Latest website. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1135. Latest website. Forming a joint venture? This idea is definitely profitable for Jiufeng, as there are no network access fees, and there will be income from subsequent signal towers. It would be great if we could establish a joint venture company, Lu Feng said to Mr. Zhou. Your company has already made such a big concession, so we can provide more funds. It doesn't matter, everyone, it's one of our own. Director Ho on the opposite side praised him. As expected of Mr. Lu, he speaks with pride. I like to have friends like you the most. Come and make one. I have a lot of bad things, but one advantage is that I am willing to spend money. As long as I think the money is well spent, it doesn't matter how much it costs. Lu Feng clinked glasses with Director Ho and continued. They brag about their wealth, but they don't realize that they spend more money just to gain control. We exchanged glasses at the wine table, and we quickly became familiar with each other. Mr. Zhou also kept talking at the dinner table, saying that he should take more care of Mr. Lu if anything happens in the future. Mr. Lu's coming here is equivalent to go home. As for this matter, as long as Mr. Lu has no problem, then it will be no problem. Mr. Zhou burped, and suddenly changed the topic and said, Mr. Lu, I am actually quite interested in how you made your fortune. For those who are interested, how come Panda's unfinished factory was taken over in Suzhou back then? When Lu Feng heard this, he said casually, I paid for it with money. No, as far as I know, many people have tried this factory before, but all failed. How come it's so easy for you? Mr. Zhou lit a cigarette and asked Lu Feng very much. He smiled like a human and said, there's no need for us to do all this nonsense. Huang Yowei didn't say hello in private at the beginning, right? This is true, Lu Feng said helplessly. Lu Feng knew very well what Mr. Zhou wanted to know. The problem was that there was nothing fishy about it. The only thing worth mentioning was that Huang Yowei wanted to promote this matter and provided some background support to Lu Feng, but that was all. Mr. Zhou was quite dissatisfied with this answer. He took a long puff of cigarette, scratched his hair with his hands, looked at Lu Feng and said, Mr. Lu, you don't regard me as one of your own. I'm already so sincere. There's no need to do these things. Why don't we all be honest? I'm really honest. If you have something, you have it. If you don't have it, you don't have it, Lu Feng said to him. Dean Wu, who was diagonally across from him, couldn't help but speak, and said, Mr. Lu, don't you have the final say whether there is or not? The question now is, it doesn't matter whether there is or not. What matters is whether you sincerely cooperate and whether you want to. When doing this business, do you treat the people at this table as your own? When Lu Feng heard this, he looked like he suddenly understood, and said hurriedly, if you put it this way, it means it must be. Isn't it done? It's such a simple thing. Come on, Mr. Lu, you are turning your back on the dark and turning to the bright. I'll give you a toast. Lu Feng clinked glasses with everyone and said, I have stopped dealing with Huang Yowei a long time ago. It's really uncomfortable to work with him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have stopped contacting him in the next few years. Let me tell you, he has an eccentric personality and is very difficult to get along with. The atmosphere at the dinner table suddenly became tense. Everyone was scolding Huang Yowei in various ways. Among those present, there were many who wanted to build relationships with him in the past few years. However, this person was so inexperienced that he took him to a karaoke to find a girl. He scolded Director Ho so much that he almost investigated the matter directly. With Mr. Lu's help, this matter will be much easier to handle. Mr. Zhou looked very happy. Holding a cigarette between his two fingers, he asked, how was the investigation in Suzhou? Fatty Wang put down his chopsticks and said, back then, he built a development zone there, and several villages were demolished. The commotion was very unpleasant. One of the villagers was seriously injured. The Panda Electronics factory was also not peaceful. Many of them it is the land owned by the village collective, and we are already in contact. Mr. Lu, you should be very clear about what happened back then. If things get mixed up here, there will be no escape from the loss of state-owned assets and illegal embezzlement. When the time comes, let some villagers come forward and you can prove it again. Is it done? Mr. Zhou said confidently, once this is done, won't the joint venture be completed? If this is investigated, didn't I go in? Lu Feng said to everyone, I can't stand out. What are you afraid of? When Huang Yowei was arrested, didn't the court sentence him? Dean Wu smiled at Lu Feng and said proudly, how to sentence, isn't it me who has the final say? Everyone laughed when they heard this. As long as Lu Feng cooperated, Huang Yowei wouldn't be able to escape even if he had wings. If you were to pick a bone among the eggs, no one would be able to find a fatal flaw. Mr. Zhou said to Fatty Tan, isn't he going to check the accounts? Let him check and cooperate fully. Let's see who can check faster. The meal had just been finished at around 9 o'clock in the evening. Mr. Zhou was in a good mood and did not want to leave. Everyone went to the dance hall again and found a dozen girls to sing and dance. During this period, Mr. Zhou promised Lu Feng that the joint venture would be held in the past few days. The company's affairs can be accomplished. If you stand in the same trench with him, you must not treat him badly. As long as the cooperation here is successful, he can find ways to promote the cooperative business of postal and telecommunications groups in multiple provinces and establish joint ventures. However, other companies cannot be like this one. They have to give him some sweeteners. What projects will come in the future? You have to think about him in every job you do. Lu Feng repeatedly promised that as long as he made some money, he would be absolutely unambiguous, and the other party became happy. It was late at night when he returned to the hotel. Lu Feng drank a little too much and fell asleep without even bothering to wash up. The next morning, as the city held a meeting, Huang Yowei personally asked about the 3 million incident. Some people in the city began to feel that something was wrong. At the meeting, Huang Yowei asked Director Ho to arrest Mr. Tan first to prevent him from running away. Unexpectedly, Director Ho refused on the spot, saying there was no legal basis. The atmosphere in the conference room was a little stiff. Everyone quietly looked at each other and didn't know what was going on. Director Ho sat there with red eyes and said angrily, arresting people is based on the law, not just a word from you arrest, release with just one sentence, this is the municipal government, not the Huang Mansion. The two deputy mayors sitting next to him stared at Director Ho in disbelief. This man was either not awake, or something big was going to happen. Finance, where are the 3 million? Ah, Huang Yowei slapped the table with an angry expression and yelled, "Why are you squandering people's money like this? That's 3 million. I haven't seen anything, and the other party is talking empty words. White Fang will take away 3 million just by saying a word." The person in charge of finance was so scolded that his eyes turned black. Director Ho kicked him off. What was he yelling at me? Huang Yowei saw his pig teammate sitting there silently and being scolded. He couldn't stand the scolding anymore. He knocked on the table with his hand and said, "Don't you know how to call the police?" The person in charge of finance reacted instantly and said hurriedly, "Director Ho, I have to call the police on this matter. 3 million is not a small number. What happened back then must be investigated clearly. It cannot be a confusing account. I call the police." Huang Yowei turned back to Director Ho and asked, "Is there a legal basis now?" At 9 o'clock in the morning, the police raided the tea house in the city center, conducted a rough search of the scene, and took away the actual controller of the tea house, 10, into custody. At the same time, Huang Yowei went to the provincial department again. Half an hour later, the Zhenjiang Public Security Bureau received an order to dispatch police officers from other places, and they could arrive within a few hours. The news that Mr. Tan had been arrested instantly detonated Mr. Zhou's entire circle. In Mr. Zhou's office, Mr. Zhou sat across from him and puffed away, seemingly not yet awake. What does Huang Yowei want to do? Let's fight to the death. Mr. Zhou frowned slightly and looked very unhappy. He smoked. I had an argument with Director Ho at the morning meeting, and now Director Ho has arrested Mr. Tan. My net, catch my fish. I don't know what he wants to do. I'm afraid this guy is not very smart. Since he wants to speed up, let's speed him up. The investigation over in Jiangsu should be faster. In the past 2 days, those farmers will be the gangster took it and asked them to go to the court to sue. Huang Yowei likes to arrest people and is not honest, so let him put on a good show. Mr. Zhou hung his head and smoked a cigarette. How about that Lu Feng? Mr. Zhou asked. It's easy to handle. It's just a businessman. It's not like you don't know what businessmen are like. I've come into contact with a lot of businessmen over the years. Just give him a little sweetener. I promise him that not only can he set up a joint venture in Jiangsu province, you can also help him move around in other provinces, and that guy's mouth is so happy that he's so happy. Mr. Zhou took a long puff of cigarette, rubbed his fingers and said, "This is what he wants." He gestured with his fist again and said, "This is what we want. We can't let Huang Yowei go through any more trouble. If something happens to Mr. Tan, it will be a big trouble. Even if we can't bring down Huang Yowei, we still have to scare him and we can't let him act arbitrarily," Mr. Zhou said worriedly. "Dad, you are just thinking nonsense. There is something wrong with Director Ho. Why bother Mr. Tan? Mr. Tan is enjoying good food, drinks, and hospitality. He will be out in a few days." Mr. Zhou put the cigarette butt in the ashtray and thought about it for a moment. "Let me contact Lu Feng. It will save me a lot of nightmares and prepare some materials for him today." Lu Feng woke up at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. His head hurt a little and his mouth was dry. He climbed out of bed and found the water dispenser and drank 2 large glasses of water before he felt better. After taking a simple bite of food, the phone in the room rang. He picked up the phone and said, "Who is this?" "Mr. Lu, it's me." "Did you drink too much last night?" Mr. Zhou's voice sounded on the other end of the phone. "I still have a headache now, but you got up quite early," Lu Feng said politely. "I'm telling you, something happened. I told you yesterday that I have to advance it. Mr. Tan has been arrested. I will go to the hotel to tell you this afternoon," Mr. Zhou said in a slightly urgent voice. Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1136. Latest website. Mr. Ten was arrested. Lu Feng really didn't expect that things had reached this point, so he hurriedly asked what was going on. The answer was that he was with Director Ho and nothing happened for the time being. Mr. Zhou means that Huang Yowei must be dealt with in the next few days, otherwise they will be too passive. Lu Feng didn't agree happily on the phone. He hung up the phone after a few vague words. He sat on the sofa, lit a cigarette and started thinking about things. I am just here to do business, these people are really mortal enemies. It is not a good thing to offend Huang Yowei. Lu Feng does not believe that Huang Yowei got to where he is today by being honest and hard-working. The conversation in the province that day clearly had something to do with Secretary Li. After thinking about the relationship network here, Lu Feng didn't want to get involved, but the question now was no longer whether he wanted to get involved. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the city held another meeting. At the meeting, Huang Yowei cursed local state-owned enterprises, accusing them of failing to contribute to the local economy, having a complicated internal structure, and being overstaffed. Although state-owned enterprises are not under his control, he has concurrent management rights over local banks that he can manage, and companies that can be controlled by the Discipline Inspection Commission. He scolded them for an hour without naming names at the meeting, saying that it is necessary to strike hard to combat the problem of the loss of state-owned assets, and it was emphasized at the meeting that state-owned enterprises are the country's enterprises and the money bags of the people across the country, not individual bosses, and they must have a correct attitude. For a time, the CEOs of state-owned enterprises felt a different smell of gunpowder. Nowadays, state-owned enterprises are basically equal to private enterprises. Many CEOs have absolute power internally. If we really want to strictly investigate, none of these people's butts will be clean. Lu Feng spent the whole afternoon thinking about this matter. For Jia Feng, the communication business must be developed. When other businesses are at their peak, other businesses should be developed, whether it is to lay the foundation for the domestic mobile phone market or to provide chips for the domestic market. The market provides a bottom market, and everyone must work on it. If you want to continue working, you have to pass the hurdle in front of you, one link after another. If there is a problem in one link, the whole thing will collapse. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Lu Feng decided to call Huang Yowei to find out. After the call was connected, the secretary picked up the phone and said that Huang Yowei was in a meeting and would call him back soon. After the meeting, Huang Yowei walked toward his office. His secretary followed closely and whispered, "Lu Feng called and wanted to talk to you." Huang Yowei smiled slightly when he heard this, as if he had already understood what Lu Feng wanted to say, and said casually, "I'll call him back later. This guy has a businessman character after all, but I have to thank him. Will this person affect something? I heard that I have been very close to Mr. Zhou in the past 2 days," the secretary replied. "It doesn't matter. This man is just a bait. Once he comes, the matter will be settled. As for the eel that is lured out of the hole and twists and turns while biting the bait, I will give him a stab in the head without delay." Huang Yowei seemed to be in a good mood. "Very good," he said to the secretary next to him, "this guy is very clever. It's not easy to be used as bait. As for the advantages he wants, can I let him take advantage? If a businessman takes advantage, it means that he is taking advantage of state-owned assets. Huge loss." When the secretary heard this, he already understood what Huang Yowei thought of Lu Feng. Now it is certain that Lu Feng called Huang Yowei to intervene in the communication business. He happened to be sleeping on the pillow. Lu Feng was definitely not responsible for this matter. The main actor is Huang Yowei. When he arrived at the office, Huang Yowei picked up the phone and called Lu Feng. After the call was connected, Huang Yowei asked with a smile, "Mr. Lu, do you have anything to do with me? I was in a meeting just now and have been busy these 2 days. I have nothing to do. I just haven't made any progress in business negotiations with the Post and Telecommunications Group. I still want to know if this matter will be successful, Lu Feng asked. Don't you know whether it will work or not? Huang Yowei asked. I know. Hey, what do I know? I've been here for so many days and held so many meetings, but there is no definite news at all. In any case, this matter is beneficial to the development of Jiangsu and the people. Lu Feng felt that if they continued fighting like this, it would be easy to delay him, so he tried. I have an immature idea, otherwise, Jiafeng, the Post and Telecommunications Group, the municipal government, and 3 parties will invest in setting up a company. Huang Yowei smiled when he heard Lu Feng's compromise method and said, I'm not a businessman. You said it's an immature idea. It definitely won't work. You don't have to worry. It might take a few hours. There is a turning point. Lu Feng, I know you are very smart, and you are often good at moving between major interest groups, but sometimes people are stupid when they should be, and watching someone kill someone on the sidelines can easily end up with blood all over them. Ah! Is it so serious? I'm an honest person, Secretary Huang, don't scare me. Lu Feng's heart skipped a beat when he heard this, and he changed his title to Secretary Huang, and continued, I am the person you understand. My greatest advantage is not that I am smart, but that I am obedient. Don't worry, what needs to be done will definitely be done. You kid took a lot of advantage from me. Today is different from the past, and we can't hold on to the old ideas. Huang Yowei said into the phone, I'll tell you the rest. I don't want to say more, the past is in the past, and the present can never be the past. I still have a meeting, so I'll hang up first. After hanging up the phone, the secretary next to me reminded, does he understand? This is a personal essence. Huang Yowei finished sorting out the folders and walked out the door. In the hotel room, Lu Feng sat on the sofa and smoked cigarettes one after another. The quartz clock on the wall was ticking, and the room was extremely quiet. Are you going to get serious? I'd better not get involved, Lu Feng muttered to himself. Lu Feng glanced at the time on the wall and saw that there was less than an hour left before the time he had agreed with Mr. Zhou. Lu Feng thought for a moment and hurried downstairs. He went to the front desk and told the little girl at the front desk that he was not feeling well. He was comfortable and wanted to go to the First People's Hospital for medical treatment. If anyone came to see him, he said he would contact him when he got back. After giving the instructions, Lu Feng took a taxi and went straight to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, Lu Feng thought about it and said that he wanted to cooperate with the communications industry. Huang Yowei was very happy. He had always wanted to develop here before. After all the objections, this answer should be so happy, because he used him to open the abscess of the Post and Telecommunications Group. When he arrived at the hospital, Lu Feng went directly to the brain department. He said he had a headache and asked to be hospitalized for observation and treatment. He also stayed in the most expensive single-room ward. At 4:30 p.m. in the detention center of the Municipal Public Security Bureau, Mr. Tan was sitting in the duty room watching TV. He glanced at the cell next to him and scolded, "Be honest, you guys came in here, I thought it was your home. What? Sit down. Not to mention how wrong the few people inside were. Why is there such a huge gap between people? 7 or 8 police cars parked outside, and more than 20 people got out." The leader was a man in his 40s. He walked in and asked the girl in charge of business at the front desk, "Where is your chief's office?" Inside, the little girl was a little confused, not knowing who these people were. The man led people directly into the office. At the same time, Director Ho's office phone was also on the phone. There was a call from the provincial department. In the office, Director Ho's face suddenly changed. He kept saying good and then said, "I am now in custody, it's good here." Besides, wouldn't it be too ostentatious to use the police in a different place for such a thing? We can cooperate with them in their work. After all, we are more familiar with it locally. As he was talking, the office door was pushed open, and a middle-aged man walked in, took out the folder under his arm, put the various documents inside on the table and said, "Director Ho, the documents from the provincial department will be issued from now on. Tan Kelly's case will be taken over by us with full authority." Director Ho froze. "Isn't this too fast? Did you drive for several hours to get here? Everyone, please sit down first. I'll organize some people and tell you about this case," Director Ho said politely. "No, now let's go see the people and free up some offices for us to conduct a surprise review. We are all brothers, so there is no need to be in such a hurry. Let's have a cup of tea. I will entertain you tonight." Director Ho also wanted to improve relations and took out the Chinese on the table to let everyone disperse the cigarettes. No one paid attention to him at the scene, so Director Ho had no choice but to put away his tricks and ask someone to take them to Mr. Tan. When they arrived at the detention center, they saw Mr. Tan not only not wearing a detention uniform, but also outside the prison cell, watching TV and smoking. He smoked cigarettes and chatted with the people inside from time to time. The atmosphere was very lively. Mr. Tan stood outside the prison cell and looked at a man inside, and boasted, "You are just a prostitute. To me, it is a trivial matter. As long as I say a word, it will be as if nothing happened to you. When you go out to hang out, you have to have someone to protect you. If you can't handle this, you just have too little support." "Then who is covering you?" a deep voice came from behind. "Are you humming, stupid?" "Of course I am." Mr. Tan proudly turned around and was about to brag, but he saw a group of unfamiliar police officers. Before he could say anything, 3 or 4 people rushed up to him and pushed him to the ground. They then cuffed him behind his back. "Who are you? Who are you? Where is Director Ho? I tell you, let me go now, or I will strip you of your skin, believe it or not," Mr. Tan shouted. "Do you think we are boiling corn on the cob? Just peel it off if you say peel it off. Let me tell you, now the province has set up a special task force to deal with your matter. We are the police from the next city and will conduct a surprise investigation on you immediately. I hope you be more honest. Take away." Mr. Tan's eyes darkened for a moment. He felt that something was completely wrong. The person who was more frustrated than him was the guy who was detained for soliciting prostitution. Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1137. Latest website. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, a Mercedes-Benz stopped at the door of the hotel. Mr. Joe got out of the car and threw the keys to the security guard. Just as he was about to enter the hotel, his cell phone rang. After answering the phone, Mr. Joe's expression suddenly changed. "Are you sure? How is Mr. Tan doing now?" Mr. Joe asked anxiously. "Find a way to deliver the message inside. No matter what, Mr. Tan must hold on and never let go. As long as he survives this time, any projects in the future will be his. I never treat my brothers. I'm sorry." Mr. Joe turned to the phone and said in a serious tone, "Be sure to send the message in." After hanging up the phone, Mr. Joe's face turned extremely ugly. He walked quickly into the hotel, went upstairs and knocked on the door for a long time, but no one opened the door. Mr. Joe felt that something was starting to go wrong. After going downstairs, he asked the front desk, "Where are the guests in room 1309? You mean Mr. Liu, right? He told us before he left that he wasn't feeling well and had gone to the hospital. He left in a hurry and didn't look good. He said he was going to the First People's Hospital," the girl at the front desk said. Sick, Mr. Joe suddenly felt something and cursed, "Damn dog merchant, he will get sick if the wind direction changes." Mr. Zhou understands that Lu Feng is hiding from him, and even if he finds him, he will have countless excuses. He does not have so much time to pursue questions now. Now he must find a way to make Mr. Ten resist the interrogation, and at the same time veto the provincial task force as soon as possible. Son. Mr. Zhou went out and drove straight to the Post and Telecommunications Group. On the way there, he called Mr. Zhou directly. Dad, Huang Yowei is trying to kill everyone. Now this matter has reached an urgent stage. I feel that if this task force cannot be overthrown within a day or two, Tan will not be able to handle it. Aren't they using police in other places? We will go to a higher level to sue him. This must be done quickly. If you go a little slower, the rice will be cooked, Mr. Zhou urged on the phone. Mr. Zhou was shocked when he heard about this. Mr. Tan had something in his belly. If it were to be dug out, it would be a big deal. On the phone, Mr. Zhou wanted Lu Feng to stand up and force Huang Yowei to give in. However, Mr. Zhou told him that Lu Feng had gone to the hospital and was unreliable. He used the topic as a pretext, and we were robbed of the opportunity. Now is no longer the time for a head-on confrontation. Let me give him a call, Mr. Zhou said helplessly. In the eyes of Mr. Zhou, what Huang Yowei wants is nothing more than to be subdued. Since his life is being pinched, he should bow his head and submit. Mr. Zhou feels that Huang Yowei just wants to bring some benefits to Lu Feng's family, so give him benefits. After hanging up the phone, Mr. Zhou called Huang Yowei directly. The secretary picked up the phone and said that Huang Yowei was in a meeting. The secretary hung up the phone, looked at Huang Yowei next to him and asked, "Do you want to call back?" "No, wait until he calls again," Huang Yowei said calmly. Mr. Zhou waited for more than 40 minutes. These 40 minutes were too difficult for him. Every second he was thinking about whether Mr. Tan would let go. At this moment, he couldn't care less and picked up the phone again. Past. Secretary Huang just finished a meeting. The secretary handed the phone to Huang Yowei. "Hey, Mr. Zhou. What's going on?" Huang Yowei's voice was slightly casual. "Secretary Huang, I have been reflecting on the matter of GFN Group in the past few days. In the final analysis, it is a good thing. As for me, I have ideological problems and do not look at the problem thoroughly enough. I have conducted deep self-reflection in the past 2 days. State-owned enterprises are based on the local area, and naturally they have to develop the local area. Some time ago, the mood was not right in various meetings, mainly because of the family members, and I hope you can understand me." Mr. Zhou's attitude was very low. "What about this? It's just a small matter. You don't need to take it to heart. Everyone's hearts are together and the goal is the same. If we have the same goal and the same direction, there will be no problem," Huang Yowei said. "You're right. I'm a few years older than you, but when it comes to doing things, I still think there are things I haven't considered. I want to ask you for more advice, and I hope you can give me more advice. Dad, I heard recently you said you were investigating the cooperation between the local government and our unit a few years ago." Mr. Zhou looked like he had no idea at all. "It's not an investigation, it's just internal rectification. As for you, you are a few years older than me. It's better not to say such things as ill-considered. After all, you are the person in charge of a state-owned enterprise, and I have nothing to teach you. What happened in the past 2 days is not for you. I just put some bad debts in the sun." Huang Yowei asked, "Does the 3 million have anything to do with you? I'm also curious about this matter, but it happened so many years ago, why check it? It's like a bee nest under the eaves of a farmhouse. If you don't poke it, it will be busy with its own business." Are you saying so?" When Mr. Zhou heard that Huang Yowei was not in a good mood, he did not lower his attitude so low. "Things are what they should be. I have been in this position for a day, and this is the truth. Mr. Zhou, there is an old saying, don't do anything bad, Don't be afraid of ghosts knocking on the door. You call me, but it's a ghost knocking on the door, but it's knocking on the door of your heart, Huang Yowei said solemnly. You are really upright and upright. You haven't taken it in these years? Have you never eaten it? Why are you pretending to be a public servant here? You just want to punish me. If you came here in the past few years, the benevolence, justice, and morality you talk about, I'm afraid it will turn into flattery for me. Since you want to fight to the death, then don't blame me for being rude. Mr. Zhou's voice became sharp and he was very excited. Do it yourself. Huang Yowei hung up the phone directly. He couldn't answer Mr. Zhou's words. The world is not black and white. Most of the time it is chaos, entangled with each other. As for the acts that created the world, no one knows. Have you ever been here? Mr. Zhou hung up the phone and started to contact his contacts. Mr. Tan had to be saved. This was not just his business, Mr. Zhou. As night fell, the phones rang one by one, but the inquiry rooms were like iron walls, and not a single radio wave could be transmitted in. Pieces of thick dark clouds completely blocked the night sky. As the wind and clouds surged high in the sky, a patch of starlight was revealed in front of people. The phone in Municipal Huang Yowei's office kept ringing, but no one answered it. The same scene happened again. At the provincial office. In the ward of the city's First People's Hospital, a young nurse came in with medicine. She looked at Lu Feng, who was lying on the bed and was more energetic than an athlete, and asked, "Do you still have a headache?" "It hurts," Lu Feng said perfunctorily as he glanced out the window. "How does it hurt?" "First it hurts inside, then outside, then the left side, and finally the right side." Lu Feng looked at her and said, "Sir, the ward you live in is very expensive and takes up the resources of other patients. If nothing goes wrong, just leave the hospital," the nurse said helplessly. "I feel so uncomfortable. This headache I have is a pinching pain. It's like being pinched by two forces, and it's excruciating pain in the middle. Do you understand?" Lu Feng sat up and asked. Okay, I'll give you an injection." The nurse took out a large, finger-long needle and said to Lu Feng, "Take off your pants and stick your butt out." "Huh?" Lu Feng looked at the needle and felt frightened, and said hurriedly, "No need for injections, people like me just need psychological treatment." After a lot of persuasion, Lu Feng finally agreed to take care of the money for the medicine, thus avoiding the need for an injection. This night was a torment for many people, but no one could be more tormented than Mr. Tan. That night, Dean Wu went to the municipal government to chat with Huang Yowei overnight, trying to find out the news. Regarding what happened before, he said he was sorry, but if Huang Yowei needed it, he could immediately turn the gun around. This is a group of people who have no faith. They carve their three views into the shape needed by the circle to fit in. When the circle they are in is about to collapse, they will change into another shape and blend into another circle. The most indispensable thing in the world is stone, but it is also stone that is finally crushed into powder. Only dough can fit into any shape or gap. You and I are walking in this world, and many times we no longer care about right or wrong. The so-called tact is just that we become strong when we are weak and weak when we are strong. In the next 2 days, when I went to Huang Yowei, there were more and more people in the provincial office, and Mr. Zhou became more and more anxious. That place was like the strongest fortress in the world. No one could make a call even if it was raining. No one could make a call in the meeting. Then one opened and everyone could see it clearly. No one mentioned Jia Feng's cooperation in communications anymore. Everything had risen to another level, a level that ordinary people dare not mention. In the provincial conference room, there was an in-depth discussion on the reform of local state-owned enterprises. At the meeting, Huang Yowei made a very radical speech, criticizing the redundant personnel of state-owned enterprises and the loss of state-owned assets. The person in charge could not distinguish between state-owned enterprises and private enterprises, and long-term labor contracts were priced and sold. Corruption is common and a series of other issues. Some people present were sweating when they heard this, and they were sitting there thinking, why did GFN come to cooperate and invest, why did it end up like this? The tone was set at the meeting, requiring state-owned enterprises to dare to reform and actively embrace the market. State-owned enterprises affiliated to the province must make achievements and upgrade their industries. At the meeting, they were asked to learn from Changhong Group. In Mr. Zhou's office, Mr. Zhou's eyes were bloodshot. He had not slept well for 2 days. At this moment, he had given up trying to get Mr. Tan out. Are they just going to ignore it? If something happens, none of them will be able to escape. Dad, we can't fall into Huang Youwei's hands, Mr. Zhou said very unwillingly. Mr. Zhou smoked silently and said in a low voice, there is a possibility that we have been abandoned. No, absolutely not, Mr. Zhou said in a panic, Tan Kelly must be shut up. Mr. Zhou put the cigarette butt in the ashtray and said with a gloomy face, if you don't do it, you won't stop. There are 2 options, either he shuts up forever, or we go abroad. You go and get the passport now, Tan Kelly, I will do it arrange. Latest website. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1138. Latest website. Mr. Tan can hardly bear it anymore. He has not had a good rest in the past 2 days. He is seriously doing extreme challenges. There is no news from the outside, and his psychological defense is in a state of collapse at any time. There is no point in carrying you like this. Who will feel sorry for you? Let me tell you this, we have already grasped part of the situation. No matter you say it or not, you will definitely not be able to escape. We are really going to start a full-scale arrest. Do you believe it or not? People put all the blame on you. A police officer smoked a cigarette and said, you are such a big man now. I don't need to tell you some truths. What are those people like? The brotherly loyalty at the wine table can still be in the face of big events. How many points are left? Let me tell you one more thing. No one has called you in the past few days to try to make money for you. That's all. You go back to rest and think about it. Mr. Tan dragged his tired body to the prison cell, feeling a little relieved. He was afraid that he would be able to resist everything in the end if he kept going on like this. Returning to the door of the cell, 2 policemen came over and said to him, your cell is full. Please move to another place today. Be more honest. As he spoke, he was taken to a prison cell at the corner, where there was a man in his 40s with an unshaven beard and a very gloomy expression, half lying in the corner without saying a word. Mr. Tan went inside and lay down on the bed without moving. An hour later, the man in the corner suddenly moved, stood up and walked towards Mr. Tan. Mr. Tan noticed that this person was approaching him, raised his head and looked at him cautiously and asked, is something wrong? How about we play a game? He stared at Mr. Tan, his eyes lifeless. If you don't play, you will be very tired. Let's play hide and seek, it's fun. Is there something wrong with you? Before Mr. Tan could finish speaking, the man suddenly strangled his neck from behind. In an instant, he struggled desperately and was knocked off the bed. His face turned red, his eyes widened, and he kicked the bed frame with all his strength. He felt that he was about to die. The next second the policeman on duty rushed over and was shocked when he saw this situation. He opened the door to separate the 2 people, and then dragged Mr. Tan out to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. An hour later, Mr. Tan decided to speak. At this moment, he already understood that he had been abandoned, and those people were willing to kill him for their own sake. In the first month of 1996, the Ministry of Economic Affairs has realized that the reform of state-owned enterprises must be serious. If it is not serious, let alone the iron rice bowl, even the alloy rice bowl will be eaten by these people. The next day, some important newspapers began to publish the meeting on the reform of state-owned enterprises, and there were also rumors that a seniority buyout system would be introduced. Many people were saying that this matter was promoted by Huang Youwei, and there were private abuses against Huang Youwei. At the beginning, the debate over whether to be state-owned or private was red-faced, comparable to the trade-related issues in the business world. Some people even raised this matter to the level of root, color, right, and left, and vigorously promoted the private economy as a capitalist rotor. At dawn, another night passed. In the morning, Huang Youwei held another meeting. At the meeting, he made it clear this time that the reform was to change. It was to change the way state-owned enterprises live, so that those who are sick within state-owned enterprises would be refunded their wages and spend money to buy long-term services. Those who work hard and those who think about having an iron rice bowl for a lifetime are disappointed. Society should be competitive, not flat. For people nowadays, lying down seems to be a new word, but at that time, if the family spent some money, found connections to buy a long-term job, and got an iron rice bowl, then they could really lie down for the rest of their lives. That guy, he was lying down. It's really flat, not something that young people nowadays can compare to. For the province, GFN is just a needle to pick out abscesses, and Mr. Joe and others are just a process, and they still have to achieve the results they want in the end. Mr. Joe stayed up all night and received a call at around 7 in the morning saying that Mr. Tan was not dead. This made Mr. Joe completely give up and immediately started arranging passports to prepare to quietly leave the country. In the morning, the provincial department meeting discussed the in-depth advancement of state-owned enterprise reform. At the meeting, it was decided to arrest a group of people as typical cases, which also showed the determination of the province. At this point in the meeting, everyone has understood that there is no turning back, and some people are destined to not be able to land safely. At 10 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Tan had already explained almost everything. He was extremely tired and asked to be given a single room so that he could have a good sleep. At 10:30, the task force, with the approval of the province, absolutely detained Fatty Wang, Dean Wu, and Ho. Director, Mr. Zhou, and his son, and a group of others. This arrest was a secret operation and was not announced to the public at first. After these people arrived at the case, they conducted surprise interrogations to clarify the twists and turns before announcing it to the public. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Dean Wu and a group of others were taken away from the office, while Mr. Zhou and his son were intercepted on the airport highway. When the news came back, Huang Youwei's heart dropped in his stomach and he asked the secretary beside him, "Didn't Lu Feng be arrested?" "No, he is not in this batch of lists," the secretary said, a little puzzled. "Why should we arrest him? He was hospitalized the day before yesterday. I heard he had a headache. He is now in the First People's Hospital. This kid is a charlatan. Let me tell you, arresting him and detaining him for a few days will give him a long memory. But it is really thanks to him that things have developed so far. Without him, the state-owned enterprise would have. It's really hard to find a reason for the problem. If we suddenly investigate, we may be accused of retaliation and it will be easily stopped," Huang Youwei said with emotion. "The key is that now he is the best developed in the private economy," the secretary said aside. "So what about the best? What do you want to say?" Huang Youwei glanced at the secretary and reminded, "Your kind of thinking is more dangerous. Our country does not lack Zhongshan Li Si, and it is not impossible to turn around without Zhongshan Li Si." Yes. The secretary didn't understand this, but Lu Feng understood it very well. Lu Feng could challenge Huang Youwei, but once he found out that Huang Youwei represented some general trend that must be implemented, he immediately hid in the hospital. A businessman can yell at the leaders of a certain city, and the worst he can do is to change places, but once he discovers that he is being holistically oriented, he has to keep his tail between his legs and disappear when he needs to. This is a smart move. A week passed in a blink of an eye. Many people were discussing the dispute between Huang Yowei and Mr. Zhou, but now no one talks about it anymore. News that Mr. Zhou was arrested has been circulating, but no one can confirm it. Meetings come one after another during this week, and many people are uncomfortable with the huge pressure. They feel that this kind of pressure should be just for show, and they can just survive this period of time. As everyone knows, the change has just begun. Lu Feng was lying in the hospital feeling like he was about to get bed sores. He looked at the weather outside every day, and from time to time he went downstairs wearing a hospital gown to smoke a cigarette and chat with other patients. On Tuesday afternoon, at a state-owned enterprise reform meeting in the province, it was announced that the Zhou family and his son, headed by the Zhou family, had been colluding with unscrupulous businessmen to transfer state-owned assets for many years, and that this incident would be used as a typical propaganda to carry out publicity on state-owned enterprises in the province. Picket, self-examine, self-innovate, actively face the market, and carry out industrial upgrading. Some adjustments were also made at the meeting. For some companies that have suffered losses all year round, they must be responsible for their own profits and losses, pay their employees, and at the same time reduce or even cancel holiday benefits, including bonuses, subsidies, etc. As soon as the news came out, the whole audience was in an uproar. This is the lifeblood of millions of water workers. The province still doesn't dare to do it all at once. It just lowers wages and cracks down on buying long-term workers. This is already very radical for them. As for directly buying out seniority, or even directly bankrupting the company without paying any money, this is not the province can and dares to decide. At 3 o'clock the next day, Lu Feng was walking downstairs in a hospital gown. He bought 2 newspapers and read through them. When he saw the arrest of the Zhou family and his son and the new developments of the state-owned enterprises, Lu Feng immediately turned around and headed towards. He went upstairs and said to the nurse in charge of his ward, "Discharge. Help me go through the discharge procedures." "Why are you being discharged suddenly?" The nurse was a little confused. "The headache is gone, so I will naturally leave the hospital." Lu Feng went back to change his clothes with a smile on his face. After packing his things, Lu Feng returned to the hotel, and the first thing he did was to call Huang Yowei. "I heard you are sick," Huang Yowei asked into the phone. "Oh, don't mention it. It's like a stroke. I suddenly had a headache a few days ago. It's that kind of neurological headache. It hurts so much that I don't want to live anymore." Lu Feng said very sincerely, "People say toothache is not a disease, the pain is life-threatening, and now my headache seems to be even worse." Huang Yowei did not expose him, and said, "I'm afraid your cooperation thing is going to be exposed. Something happened to Mr. Zhou and he was arrested." "Ah," Lu Feng's voice was very surprised, "isn't this too fast? But it doesn't matter. We just want to cooperate with the Post and Telecommunications Group. As for whether the person signing the contract is named Zhou or Huang, it doesn't matter. Well, in the province, they are very optimistic about your project and are willing to support it. However, the Post and Telecommunications Group has suffered a lot of losses. It will be difficult to invest in signal towers later. The network access fee can be waived. You will need to pay a large share of the later construction costs. The advantage is that, you will have the right to benefit from the subsequent construction of the signal tower for 10 years." Huang Yowei stated his plan. When Lu Feng heard such a big framework, he thought about it silently. In the future, there will definitely be a struggle for control within Jiafeng. The subsequent construction costs will definitely be a trouble in the future. Leave the trouble to John and his gang. It's a good thing. I accept this framework. Can we discuss the details in person? Lu Feng asked. I've been very busy recently, and the Postal and Telecommunications Group also needs someone to take over. In a few days, you've been staying in the hospital for such a long time, so it won't be long. Let me tell you in advance that the construction of signal towers in the next few years will be very important. It's so big that 1 or 200 million can't be spent, Huang Yowei warned. Then I have to ask another question. Do I have the right to deny entry to other mobile phone manufacturers in the signal towers I will build later? Lu Feng asked. This can be discussed. Lu Feng laughed when he heard this. After a long time, this is a monopoly business. Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1139. Latest website. Huang Yowei told Lu Feng on the phone that it would take a few days to formally negotiate, but the ultimate goal of this cooperation is to use cooperation to improve the capabilities of communication base stations. This is also a bold move for the province. Try. Although Huang Yowei said on the phone that this was a win-win situation, Lu Feng also knew that he did not take advantage this time. The subsequent construction would be a huge investment. The only advantage he could take advantage of was probably that Huang Yowei could not imagine it. How rapidly will communication develop in these 10 years? The arrest of Mr. Zhou and his son had caused an earthquake in the area. Many people were on tenterhooks, fearing that they would also be implicated. A few days passed by and Lu Feng did not see any subsequent arrests. He already knew in his heart that this was just a blow to the two thorns in the side, Mr. Zhou and his son. Neither Huang Yowei nor the province had the courage to continue investigating. In the evening, Lu Feng's cell phone rang. He thought it was a call from the province, so he picked it up and said, "Hello, is there any good news?" "Xiao Feng, I'm your mother." My mother's voice came from the other end of the phone. "Mom? Are you okay?" Lu Feng was a little surprised that his mother called. "The Chinese New Year is only half a month away. When will you come back?" my mother asked with concern on the phone. "Wear more clothes when you come back. It's cold here. I bought a whole sheep this year and asked for it. I bought a lot of seafood. You set a date and we will pick you up at the airport." "I'm not sure yet. It's probably going to be soon. I still have some things at hand. I'll go back after finishing it," Lu Feng replied. "You can come back as early as possible. Let me tell you, there is a surprise this time." My mother was very mysterious on the other end of the phone. I could hear my father's laughter next to me. It seemed that the surprise was big. Lu Feng asked them to try not to arrange too many relatives. He wanted to go home and have a rest and did not want to be busy socializing. The two elders readily agreed, but they refused to reveal the contents of the surprise at all. 2 days later, I received a notice from the province that I had to go to the provincial commercial office for negotiation, as well as the acting CEO of the Post and Telecommunications Group. After hanging up the phone, Lu Feng changed his clothes and went straight to the provincial office. When he arrived, there was a dedicated person to receive him. The conference room also turned into a VIP reception room. There were single sofas and a small table between the two sofas. There are tea and fruits on display, which looks very formal. When Lu Feng came in, he saw a man in his 40s had arrived. The man was a little tall, about 1.8 meters tall, wearing a pair of black-rimmed glasses. When Lu Feng came in, he stood up and asked, "Good President Lu of Feng Group." "Hello, hello," Lu Feng said politely. "Hello, I am the Deputy General Manager of the Post and Telecommunications Group. I am now taking the place of the original President Zhou. I am just a substitute. I will send someone over later. This time I am talking to you. My surname is Chu." The other party handed it over very politely. A business card and a handshake with Lu Feng. Compared with the arrogance of Mr. Zhou before, the person in front of him can be said to be a man with his tail between his legs. Lu Feng handed over his business card, and the two parties chatted about some cooperation matters. The other party could be said to know everything. Mr. Chu said to Lu Feng, "As long as the province thinks there is no problem, we will have no problem and will fully cooperate." Lu Feng smiled and said yes again and again. He could tell that the buttocks of the person in front of him were not very clean. A few minutes later, a person in charge from the Provincial Department of Commerce came in. After a few polite words, he sat down and said that Huang Yowei would come over after a while and he would take the lead in this matter. "Mr. Lu, we should keep in touch in the future. We should learn more from you in terms of management. This is also the new direction of the local post and telecommunications group." Mr. Chu said humbly, "Don't look at the big age difference between us. People's mentality is still relatively young. We are doing very well, so we can all grow together," Lu Feng said politely. The door of the conference room was pushed open, and Huang Yowei walked in and said, "You must learn the management of private companies, but you cannot learn how to put profits first. After all, you are responsible for public utilities." Huang Yowei walked in and everyone stood up. He took a look and said with a slight squeeze, "Everyone, sit down. I'm calling everyone here today, just for one thing, to get state-owned enterprises out of their comfort zones. GFN Group, as the largest private enterprise in China, is still very fast in research and development in communications. Our wireless phone development is relatively slow. In this regard, both parties it is a very good cooperation to increase cooperation and promote the development of domestic mobile phones. The Posts and Telecommunications Group had a wrong understanding of the development of wireless phones before, but now it has been corrected. I still hope that the Posts and Telecommunications Group can consider it carefully," Huang Yowei said to Mr. Chu. "I think this is a very good thing. I have also gone abroad for inspection before. I have always maintained a positive attitude towards cooperation with GFN Group. However, I have been suppressed internally by the Zhou family and his son some time ago. Now it is clear that the clouds are clearing." Yes, Mr. Chu seemed to feel lucky to see the light of day again. Regarding the cooperation with GFN Group, he couldn't wait to put his feet up and agree. Since the Posts and Telecommunications Group has no problem, then it is a way of cooperation. I heard that Mr. Zhou had talked with Mr. Lu before about establishing a joint venture. This is a good idea. How much investment will both parties make? How many signals will be built in the province in the next few years? Tower, the issue of ownership, and who will supervise it, these are what we will discuss today," Huang Yowei said to the crowd. Mr. Chu looked around the scene and said, "Assisting private enterprises is also the responsibility of our state-owned enterprises. I think we will contribute 70% of the investment. In the next 5 years, we will double the investment on the current basis. As for the coverage of signal towers, as for the management rights of the joint venture, it is obvious that Mr. Lu is faster than us in corporate management. It is managed by GFN Group, and we just use this window to observe and learn, and we can make progress together." When Lu Feng heard this, he couldn't help but smile on his face. "Isn't this great?" "No," the person in charge of the Department of Commerce sitting nearby said, "this is a typical loss of state-owned assets. We must ensure equal rights and responsibilities." "That's right, our state-owned enterprises cannot suffer losses in this matter." Huang Yowei took over and said, "No one here is talking to you now, the whole of Jiangsu is talking to you." Mr. Chu originally thought that this meeting was just a formality. In the final analysis, it was Huang Yowei looking for some favors for his own people, but the current situation made him a little confused. He seemed to be cruel to his own people. "I understand Mr. Lu, and I also understand GFN Group. You are not short of money. You have so much money with overseas financing, right?" Huang Yowei continued, "Wherever this money goes, it will be construction. It is better to build domestically. Even if something goes wrong with the company, those signal towers don't have long legs and can't run away." This time it was Lu Feng's turn to be confused. Looking at Huang Yowei, he felt like he was trying to take advantage of the old rich man. You can't say that. Business is business. Besides, we can't assume that my company will go bankrupt or be sold. I also have to put the interests of the entire group first, Lu Feng said hurriedly. Are you from our country? Have you not immigrated? Huang Yowei asked. No. Isn't this the end of it? How good is it to use foreign devils' money to build infrastructure in China? So, I think that in this joint venture, GFN Group will provide 90%, and the Posts and Telecommunications Group will provide 10%. What about the equity? GFN occupying 51%, we will take care of you. During the 10-year cooperation period, during these 10 years, you will triple the coverage of local signal towers. The regulatory power will be returned to the province. How is it? Huang Yowei expressed his thoughts. After Lu Feng heard this, he was dumbfounded on the spot. Why did he feel that Huang Yowei had the illusion that he would never see each other again until he was done with this job? He didn't catch a private enterprise like this and treat it as a fool. Mr. Chu was also dumbfounded. Lu Feng was not yours. It was said that the two of them were as close as father and son. But what was going on with the scene in front of him? The tiger father gets his dog son? No, you just said that the rights and responsibilities are equal. We paid so much money, but the rights we got are completely unmatched. Lu Feng was anxious. He was not as good as Mr. Zhou and his son. You must know what Huang Yowei did. He originally you should just pout him. Lu Feng proposed his own plan. Both parties would pay the same amount. The Posts and Telecommunications Group would be responsible for the construction, and the GFN Group would be responsible for the supervision. He didn't have much objection to the remaining equity. Huang Yowei directly rejected it. This time, even the person in charge of the Department of Commerce felt that Huang Yowei had gone too far and whispered a few words of persuasion. Unexpectedly, Huang Yowei slammed the table and shouted angrily, "In business, you must give full play to your greatest advantage. We have a big advantage, so we should take the biggest advantage. We don't have to do this project at all. Can you not do it? If we can't talk about it this year, then don't talk about it anymore. I'll leave you alone for a year and you'll see." Lu Feng felt unhappy after hearing this, and said to Huang Yowei, "I am sincere and for the sake of the people of the province and the development of science and technology. Don't make such high-profile remarks to me. This is the plan. If you accept it, accept it. If you don't accept it, we won't discuss it. It's getting late. Let's break up for dinner first." Huang Yowei stood up and left with a livid face. After everyone left the conference room, only Lu Feng and Mr. Chu were left in the room. Mr. Chu looked at Lu Feng and looked at him, and said, "Can you give me back your business card?" Lu Feng took out his business card from his pocket and slapped it on the table. On the way to the cafeteria, the secretary followed Huang Yowei closely and said in a low voice, "Why are you so cruel to Lu Feng? Even if you give a little benefit to this project, it doesn't matter." Huang Yowei glanced at the secretary and replied, "Have you ever seen anyone whose reputation goes up the ladder with a businessman behind his back?" Lu Feng was right, this was just a business, and we would never have any contact with each other again. Latest website.